Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to Quicksand Years, poem number 8 of the 18 of Whispers of Heavenly Death. One more time we're back to Whitman's theodicy. You'll remember that our big five, what does this text say about epistemology, what you can know, ontology, who you are, psychology, the study of the individual mind, sociology, the study of the collective mind, and then that last one is theodicy. Why must there be pain and suffering? It is, I think, instructional. That this poem starts in drum taps and ends up in Whispers of Heavenly Death. Well, maybe you have to ask, why? I think the key answer is theodicy. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt, our playlist. Everything from inscriptions up through and including a set of introductory comments for intro that are introductory to Whispers of Heavenly Death. We just finished with assurances. And now we will turn to our Nortons to hear a little bit of background information about this poem. We're told that this poem, the long first line doubled as title in the first appearance, Drum Taps 1865, and in the Drum Tap Supplement to Leaves of Grass 1867, transferred with present title to the Whispers of Heavenly Death Cluster, Passage to India in 1871. Now, we're going to hear this word substance in this poem, and Norton's will as well tell us that the concept of a final substance was reflected in ancient magic, alchemy, and science, and may be said to survive in modern nuclear research. Of course, we've been playing around with the ways that Whitman loves to dance with this idea of the logos as being this idea of this substance, this core idea of substance, and it'll take us obviously back to other parts of Leaves of Grass where he'll play around with the idea of the power of the soul. Just to think about it for a moment, now that you've been reading with us for quite some time, think about how sand keeps coming back again and again as valuable in Leaves of Grass, as a powerful symbol, right? Both positive and negative. The poem, now Quicksand Years. Quicksand years that whirl me, I know not whither. Your schemes, politics, fail, lines give way, substances mock and elude me. Only the theme I sing, the great and strong possessed soul eludes not. One's self must never give way. That is the final substance. That all out of all is sure. Out of politics, triumphs, battles, life, what at last finally remains? When shows break up, what but oneself is sure? Now, this is a compelling poem to me. And the paradoxes of this poem, I think, as I've said this to you before, I think Whitman is having an amazing time writing these poems and publishing them. For example, quicksand sucks one down. Notice it's quicksand years that whirl me, which is the opposite of coming down. Whirling is to be taken up into the wind, almost tornado or hurricane-like. To that degree, I think Whitman is playing around with all kinds of interesting paradoxes in this poem. By the way, think about sand again and the way that sand has come back again and again. Think about how quicksand years, and again, this idea that it's been a long time, Whitman is saying in his theodicy, there's a lot of pain, the years, both for himself as well as for his nation. I mean, the explanation of why this is going to end up in drum taps first makes a lot of sense, because there is so much political upheaval during that time that we would constitute as the drum taps Civil War time period. Notice this idea of whirling takes us back to Song of Myself 26 and as well spontaneous me. Do you remember in spontaneous me that he talked about the dead leaf whirling? And then he says it, these quicksand years whirl me, I know not whither. This I know not, you'll remember in Cabin Ships at Sea. And this idea of I know not is obviously his fallibilism, right? It's interesting, your here is now the years. Your schemes, look at the list. Politics, obviously we've already studied a lot about Whitman as politician. Fail, notice the comments to break up this. Lines give way. Now this is interesting, this word lines. Like, what is he talking about? Well, if this is a poem of drum taps, battle lines give way. Right, got it. Substances, we're going to come back to it again in a moment. Substances mock and elude me. This isn't the first time that we've heard this about mocking, right? Only the theme I sing, which is interesting because this idea of the theme takes us back to music. And of course, if you'll look at the next poem, the word music is right there in the title and of course in the first line. And we've seen this all the way through Leaves of Grass. I hear America singing and the like. Notice the theme I sing, the great and strong possessed soul eludes not. This idea of the soul, and of course the celebration of the soul, is central to our study of Leaves of Grass. You could make the argument, go back and look, for example, at our lectures at learnstrong.net on specifically Plato's Phaedo, and you'll see what I'm saying. I think Plato stands behind a whole lot of what Whitman is doing as philosopher in Leaves of Grass. That argument that there has to be something more than body. There has to be something, call it whatever you want to call it, mind, consciousness, soul, spirit, energy, whatever you want to call it. You have to have a mind to argue there is no mind. And I think Whitman would argue you have to have a soul to argue there is no soul. So notice here he'll say the strong possessed, later he'll call it this final substance, is the soul. And then he uses this phrase, one's self. Notice it's spelling with the hyphen. And for those of you that are going, now where have I seen that? Well, of course we've heard it in Song of Myself 48. And I have said that the soul is not greater than the body. I said the body is not greater than the soul. And nothing, not God, is greater to one than one's self is. But there, it isn't spelled the way it is here. But if you go all the way back to the very first poem of Leaves of Grass, and I think Whitman is doing this intentionally. Look at the very first poem. One's self I sing. Look at the spelling. One's self I sing, a simple separate person, yet utter the word democratic, the word en masse. And of course, he'll continue at the very end of life, immense in passion, pulse in power, cheerful for freest action formed under the laws divine, the modern man, and there it is, I sing. This idea of oneself must never give way. In other words, this is the argument of Socrates in Plato's Phaedo, right? That is the final substance. Notice the use of the dash. We've seen it often, and it makes us think of our Emily Dickinson, doesn't it? That out of all is sure. Back to assurances. So you can see how these poems start to build on each other in this brilliant cluster called Heavenly, right? Out of politics, out here meaning even beyond, right? Out of politics, triumphs, battles. Think about drum taps being where this poem first started. Life, what at last finally remains. When shows break up, in other words, the end of the drama, what but oneself is sure? So notice, sure remains. Well, what is the question that he's asking here? Well, it's the question of theodicy. In other words, when the terrible pain that ultimately must come, Beowulf's Part 3 dragon, we're all going to meet it, because again, you've not met any 200-year-old people. That is to say, you can't swing at the park forever. Sooner or later, you got to go to the van. All children learn this lesson early on. Well, when that happens, what is sure? What remains? His answer is the soul. That is to say, the other part of you that isn't your body. Now, at 2a, of course, the message here is simple. The soul is what matters most. Go back to our study of Plato's Republic, especially books 6 and 7. Remember when we played that game of form theory, and we talked about in the first box the beautiful body, and in the second box beauty itself, the concept of beauty. You'll remember that in the first box we'll always put the body. In the second box we're going to have to put something other than the body. What are we going to call it? Soul, spirit, consciousness, whatever you want to call it. Whitman loves the word soul, and that's where he puts it. What are we saying about the first box? That is to say, of or related to the five senses. Well, we're not saying they don't exist, those things. We're just saying they're not real. Real in some fundamental way, and that's the game that he's playing. At 2b, I love this use of oneself and the way that he spells it, taking us all the way back to the very first poem of Leaves of Grass. In other words, we've got these echoes that are constantly happening back to earlier parts of the Deathbed Edition, which is why it's so much fun to sit down and study these poems as Whitman will have finished them in this Deathbed Edition, one right after the other, to see the contiguity of them all. And again, I love the irony of the game that he's playing with quicksand and whirls. To me, that's always fun, the way he plays that game. At 3a, there's so many texts that we could relate to this, but I'm just going to throw out Emerson's Oversoul. We've given full lectures on it at learnstrong.net. Go back and read that again and then pick up this poem. It's pretty compelling, the correspondences there. Finally, at 3b, how are we going to own a poem like this one? Well, how about you? Like, where do you come down on this idea of the power of the soul, the transcendence of the soul over the body? I mean, do you believe in that kind of thing? Is it for you instructional in any way? Is it a comfort to you in any way? And then the other question is, if we can use this yourself or oneself idea, and the word sure. How sure are you in yourself? And to what degree is your study of Leaves of Grass helping to grow that confidence? I hope that that's happening. Thank you.